Recording in progress. Hello, guys. Wait a minute. There's like only 5% of the class here. What's happening? Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hey. So, what happened to everybody?
Sir,
Wait
Chris.
till tomorrow.
Crit is tomorrow. Well, firstly, what I will say, guys, if there's going to be, I'm going to say, a life and death situation, and I'm guessing that sometimes crit is considered life and death. I mean, remember that we also have a schedule here as well. So somebody from the class would need to let me know if there's going to be, you know, if there is a request that we can kind of shift things around, if possible. Because remember, we have a schedule that we have to keep. And if we don't keep it, then you know the final crit and having to do other stuff don't work either. But the truth is that, guys, you have to let me know. If I don't know, then we won't be able to proceed. Right. So what I can do for you now that I know that you have a crit is that I can try to be quick. What about the evening class? Are there plans not to come to the evening class?
Sir, I think that's gonna be very complicated for most people.
Most people preparing for the crit.
Yeah, they're probably gonna bleach. I don't have clear tomorrow, but probably it's gonna be really complicated.
Yeah, yeah, I had a feeling. Well, what you guys can do for me is that because we only have classes on Monday, we cannot not have any form of class because that would push your entire schedule back by a week, which you only have 12 of them. So kind of imagine something that would have finished a week earlier now is going to finish a week late. So what we can do going forward, if you have a crit and let's say the nighttime have to be used to prepare for the crit, then what we can do is work on the class so that we have half the class and everybody come to that. Everybody make sure they're there for that half, and then I will negotiate to give you guys the other half, which would be in the evening. But at least we would keep the schedule because whatever we plan to do, I could work it so that we can fit it in half the class. You guys understanding it?
Yes, sir.
Right. So the key thing is communication. I mean, if somebody from the course does communicate with me, then I can try and work with you because I know how studio is. But at the same time, what I also know is that if you push everything to the back burner, it is going to come tumbling down at one point, and that is not going to be nice either. So the best thing I can do is try and work with you guys and set up the work in such a way so that we can achieve both. Right? So as how the horse is already gone through the gate, what I can do for you guys is to have the working session from in the morning from now. So that way you don't have to come to the working session later, since that's going to be very complicated. So what do you guys say?
So I think more people might come to the working session, but I'm not sure.
Hold on, I can't hear you.
So
Repeat.
I said I think more people will come to the working session, but I'm not sure.
More people would come to the working session later than now. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think so, but I'm not sure. We'll have to confirm.
All right. Well, I mean, well, like we can just have class as usual then. And if people come, then they come, and if not, then we move on. Cause we do an exercise every day. So, so let's do that then. So, is the consensus that we stick with the regular schedule? We have our class now, and then we have the working session class later. Is that the consensus?
Sure, I think that works. If anything, we can just watch the recording, right?
Well, hopefully. It's a new topic, so you can't ask the recording questions. If I recall, last week, some persons didn't go according to plan, and we had to figure out some issues with Photoshop. So that is the only thing. But yes, to answer your question, you could watch it, and that could keep you on schedule. And remember, it is the exercises are due at the end of the class, right? All right, and we have our assignment coming up. I think week after next. Speaking of that, let's take a look on our schedule, because we are going to stick to this schedule, because if it's one thing, I want to make sure that you guys have a palatable, I think that's the best word, a palatable module, right? You know, like when people say, boy, that pill hard to swallow. I don't intend to make DDM a hard pill to swallow. It can be actually fun. It can be like ice cream rather than a pill. But if we stick to the schedule, oh, right. So let's see. Let's go to student and computing, and then we go to DDM. All right. So today is the 23rd. So we have today we have introduction to vector graphics, and for the working session we have for the working session all right, we actually have something that is trailing behind that we didn't cover. I don't remember. I think it was because of how the week was. I was hoping to cover that this class, but okay, we'll wait till our next class to cover that. It is a thing with the computers. We're supposed to have covered that already. But anyway, we'll have to catch up on that. But in the meantime, we should have exercise 3, actually. Let me double check this schedule. No, it's the 23rd. Yeah, it says exercise 3. Oh, I'm looking on the 16th. My bad. Yeah, so we have exercise 3 today. And then we have introduction to vector graphics. So that's what we're doing now. All right, guys. So we will dive right in and proceed as planned. Whoever is on the train can remain on the train. Whoever not on the train, they're going to have to run and catch up. You know? Anybody ever see when a bus leaving somebody and them have to run and hop on the bus? All right, all right, all right, all right, all right, all right. You know, when a bus need to load and them say two and ready, one and ready, and you go in the bus and there's like nobody in the bus. And then
Sir.
you see it and them trick you because they want you to
Elevated.
go in the bus. Say again?
Elevated bus.
I still remember. Do they still do those tricks?
So I don't know, I don't take bus.
Oh, okay. All right. I get you. I just hear you. All right. So, regardless that the bus isn't filled, we are still driving off. So, I'm just pulling up the work here. Okay, so today we're going to talk about vector graphics. We are finished with Photoshop, done and gone. And today we are moving on to a next topic. So just like how you have Photoshop deals in the world of pixels. And remember, we've been having a conversation on pixels and image size and all of this. Right. So vector doesn't deal with pixels. Vector actually deals with algorithms, right? So speaking of pixels, you guys do have a question for me to answer, which I'm going to post that question. So the last time we spoke on image, okay, there is only, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I will continue this next class and I'll just go straight into vector graphics because last time we had this discussion on image size and I don't think everybody fully got it. And there is a class exercise that is coming up but I don't know if everybody understood exactly when you're calculating image size. So I'm going to continue this one a little later, and I'm just going to focus on vector graphics, and I'll keep today's class short and snappy since it's a tricky day, right? So let's do vector graphics and get that out of the way. All right. Let me see. Present 1 second script. There we go. All right. We also have some videos to watch. So let us get into that.
Illustrator really changed things way back. It started making the computer a real graphics tool.
I think I just saw the future, and it just was really exciting to me. I just wanted to learn it.
You've never seen anything do something like this before. You can make changes and things would happen instantaneously. It's like magic.
So I'm the classically trained graphic designer. I did rub down text. That's sort of like bear skins and stone knives.
So, um, so when we say graphic designer nowadays, um, what kind of people are we talking about? Jadmar, give me an idea. When we say graphic design, what kind of people are we talking about?
So people who are good with like creating logos or something like that.
Yeah, okay, good. Creating logos. And Evelyn, what kind of tools? Like, okay, so you're good with creating logos, but how do they create these logos? What, when you say, "Oh, I'm a graphic artist," how do you imagine they create these things?
So through programs like Photoshop,
Exactly,
InDesign.
exactly. As a matter of fact, when we say we're a graphic artist, it could also mean that we even edit videos. We do some, you know, social media stuff. It's really it's kind of linked to the meaning of digital. Yeah, what you saying, Evelyn?
No, sir.
Right. So it's kind of linked to digital. Like when we say graphic artist, we think, okay, this person is good with Photoshop. He's like Photoshop graphic artist. But the truth is that graphic artists originally, it wasn't about whether they use a computer or not. It was just that they were good with art. And in a way, they're like a type of engineer, which is weird to say. So when I say a type of engineer, meaning that when you say somebody's an engineer, it doesn't necessarily mean that they only use the computer or they only work on physical stuff. So that's kind of who a graphic artist was. But nowadays, graphic artist is somebody, oh, they can use a computer really well. I would just summarize it and say, oh, they can use Photoshop. So when this person is talking about the kind of classical graphic artist, this is what they mean, that it was the original graphic artist.
So I'm the classically trained graphic designer. I did rub down text. That's sort of like bear skins and stone knives. I used French curves and rulers.
The process of getting camera-ready art was pretty involved back in the day. You had multiple elements. This is a really old piece that was done before computers.
It was really time intensive. You would sketch out a comp with all the measurements, and then you'd lay out your page. Copy had to be spec'd. What kind of typeface are you going to use? What point size?
The text was spit out from a typesetter, which was cut up and pasted onto the boards.
One page of set type, it might take a day or 2 days to actually do.
The rapidograph.
You know what repeatographs are, that pen that always clogs up and spits.
It stains clothes, it stains your hands.
The rapidograph decides to explode. Anything could go wrong.
When your hand is just doing the final little touch and all of a sudden you jerk and it's ruined and you'd have to start all over again.
I'm just so pleased that I never have to struggle through that again.
What do you say, Karen? Any memories come back from that?
Nope, sir.
Oh, y'all didn't use like pens, ink pens in first year?
Just start using it, sir.
Okay, okay. Anybody else use the repeatograph? Didn't you have to do like a section or something of a tool? You guys did that exercise, right?
Yes, we did tools, but was by pencil.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you didn't have the exploding pen with ink that mess up your hand and mess up the paper and have to start over. Yeah, okay. Actually, a lot of that is very similar to when I was in first year, because we had to use French curve and rulers and do lettering and the whole excitement. Anyway.
John Warnock always had a vision in his mind of Adobe Illustrator existing. I just don't think the technology was there. The computer wasn't there.
I had joined Xerox in 1978, and their goal was to make the office of the future. We had text editors, email networks, we had laser printers. What they didn't have is graphic engines that could make sort of arbitrary graphics. They were computer scientists, and they were imagining what computer scientists wanted to do. They weren't imagining what the world was trying to do from a creative point of view, and they were simply not making tools to address that community.
One time I was at a conference listening to John speak, though, and he said the reason he invented Illustrator was because his wife couldn't ink. I know he meant it very kindly, but...
I think Marva and her graphic design background influenced John to venture into the world of graphic arts and to solve problems for graphic designers.
The very first thing we collaborated on was radial corners.
Letraset had corners that were pre-done, and if you needed a specific radius that they didn't have, you were out of luck. She would say, I need a rectangle that's this size with this radial corner, and I would fill in a couple of parameters and print it. Trying to figure out how to do that on the computer was really critical to the design of PostScript.
John Warnock and Chuck Geschke invented PostScript because there was something missing in the industry. There was bitmap typefaces and bitmap images.
Anybody remember what's bitmap images? Remember we spoke about that last class? Abigail, do you remember? Bitmap images? Rings a bell?
No, sir.
Remember we spoke about pixels, right? And we looked on some of these pictures, and we saw that these pictures were made up of these little square dots. So these square dots are bitmaps. And basically, this image is made up of 3,000 square dots going this way and 1,686 square dots going that way. So these square dots is what we refer to as bitmap. So what they're saying is that all images that exist on computers existed only as square dots, as pixels, which is bitmaps.
Okay, I got you, sir.
Lots of languages driving printers, so they wanted to come up with the universal language which would drive a printer of any make, any model, now and into the future. And that was an amazing vision.
If it wasn't for PostScript, there would be no desktop publishing. It sort of opened the doors that you were able to produce layouts and magazines.
All right, so this is the main difference right here between the two. Now, when we use Photoshop, and all of us have used Photoshop before by now, Photoshop uses pixels, but Vector or Illustrator uses vectors, right? So what that is like is, I'm going to show you. So for example, if I have Photoshop here, and I'm going to, right, so I'm going to dock Photoshop here. And let's say that I have Illustrator. And to dock Illustrator here. So this is what Illustrator looks like. And they are quite similar, right? Isn't it so, Ansel? Quite similar. They look like almost the same, but one is blue and one is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Now, that little invention that that person is speaking about, I'm going to say new file. I'm going to say letter size, create. I'm going to go new file here. Here is the one for Photoshop. I'm going to say letter size here. So both of them create a page. Oh, my bad. Let me rotate this 90 degrees. Right, so that we are pretty much the same. And we have the same kind of panels as well, just like Photoshop. So we're going to close these panels because we're not talking about the interface just yet, right? What we're talking about is just, let's pull these out. And let me just close them. Just close everything. Right. So here we have Photoshop on the left and Illustrator on the right. Now, Photoshop works with pixels. So for example, if I draw a circle, this circle that exists here exists because it is pixels. So if I zoom in, eventually, oh, sorry, this is Illustrator. If I draw, sorry, if I draw a circle, let's draw a circle in Photoshop. Here we go. Right. So I draw this circle here, and I'm just going to use a filled circle. Or you know what? Let me use pixels. Draw a circle like that. There we go. If I zoom in far enough, what do you see? Marvel. What are these? What are these called?
Staircase, a joke. Pixels.
Exactly. They're called pixels. But in Illustrator, and I'm gonna fill this. There we go. There is no pixels. So Illustrator uses what's called vectors. And for pixels, pixels are represented as bits, zeros and ones. Like if you've ever seen like a binary set of digits, and those binary set of digits kind of represent the positions and the shading of each of these pixels. Now, for vector, it is represented by algorithms, right? And that is the huge difference between pixels and vector. One is generated from pixels. It's a bitmap because the reason it says bitmap is because it's made up of bits. And the other is made up of algorithms, meaning formulas. And these formulas basically tell the printer or tell your screen what to produce. And it doesn't obey by the rules of pixels. So when a bitmap tell your screen what to produce, it has to do it in the language of, okay, I want a square to be here, that's gray. I want another square to be here, that's lighter gray, and so forth. That is the language how bitmap sounds. But with vectors, it uses a different language. And the result of that language is that it is not generated from pixels. So under the hood, when you look on this image, it's just a bunch of numbers instead of a bunch of bits representing pixels. And that is the major difference between the two.
PostScript was a page description language, and you use this language to describe how to draw the page. The description of the objects are all vectors and curves. The major breakthrough with PostScript is that you could have any size type. You could stretch it and squash it and do anything you wanted to it. It could deal with images, it could deal with graphics, but you had to be a programmer to actually do it. There weren't.
Right. So that was like back in the day. So what they mean is that, where is Illustrator? There we go. Right. So what I mean is that if you wanted to manipulate these pixels, the way you do it is by actually, so for example, if I get a brush here, this brush is probably big. Is it? use a brush here. Right. So the way that you manipulate a bitmap is that you have to, so if you notice, I have a round brush, but when I paint with it, it paints as with squares. And the reason for that is that the language that is used for bitmaps, it has to be a square. It has to be with pixels, right? And the thing about pixels is that they are like very finite. There can only be a certain amount. There is no image that has an unlimited amount of pixels. It doesn't matter how high resolution something is. Eventually, you can zoom down to the little bits, um, the little pixels that made up that image. And the thing about it is that manipulating pixels, they're not driven by an algorithm really. So for example, if I wanted to erase these pixels, I could go to my eraser tool and I could erase it like that. So now this eraser is simply just telling the pixels that, hey, wherever the eraser goes, you're going to get rid of the closest square that's here. On the other hand, with vector, it is based off of a formula. So for example, if I try to use the erase tool here, then you're going to get something that is 100% sharp because there is no resolution. There is no square dots. Instead, it is using an algorithm and you can manipulate that algorithm. So for example, if I click on this point here, I can move the edge of this edge here. Now, if I wanted to do that with pixels, they like I can't grab the pixels and move it. Well, I can kinda, but I don't know if you remember when we manipulated the car in Photoshop and I showed you that example, that when you squash and stretch pixels, you can actually lose information, right? Um, because when it's like just like trying to draw this thing here. You only have a limited amount of square dots that's trying to represent this circle. But with vectors, it is just based on a formula that says, hey, if I click on this dot here and I move this handle, calculate what is the curviness of this other line that's adjacent to this angle. Like it's just working out a formula to get you this. That is not what you have to do with pixels. Like if you wanted to curve that, you would have to manually, I don't know, paint it or something. You'd have to like be very, or something like that. All right. All right. Gavin, you understanding what we're saying? Any questions?
Yes, sir, I understand.
Right. Cool. All right. Let's continue. We're not going to watch all of this video, only just tidbits of it.
Any applications to drive it. We started development in 1985 of Illustrator.
Mike Schuster was the very first programmer on the product. He's clicking and dragging and creating a Bezier curve. I was pretty amazed by that.
It was a direct translation of how people drove PostScript, but you didn't have to program. It would just emit the PostScript code that would make the drawing for you. It gave you very, very precise control, which I knew from Marva's work you needed. You had to have it. When Illustrator went into beta, I wanted to do a drawing that would express something that you absolutely couldn't program. I drew on a piece of tracing paper a picture of a rose, but then I executed it in Illustrator. When people saw that this was the kind of thing that you could do with Illustrator, they just went bonkers. They thought that was fantastic.
It was just revolutionary.
Anybody here do technical drawings? I know we don't do that anymore because everybody uses AutoCAD, right? Anybody know what?
Used to.
Right, probably used to. Right. So what happened is that technical drawing was very technical. Like what do you construct with technical drawing? Give me an example, anybody, when you used to do it. What kind of things would you draw?
A helix.
Right. What else? Like not necessarily the shapes, but what kind of objects?
Curves.
Curves?
Yeah, like a lot of curves.
Okay, you're still giving me the shapes. What kind of objects? What do you draw using technical drawing? Do you draw plans? Do you draw
Tools.
mach what?
Tools.
Drones, you say?
Tools.
Tools, right, exactly. So technical drawing was used to draw a lot of engineering and mechanical thing, tools, screw heads, all sorts of machine stuff. And the reason it was technical drawing is because it was very precise. You have to use protractor to calculate the angle. You use a T-square so that your angles will be perfectly square. You know what I mean? There are all sorts of measurements that you used to use to construct these things, but you had to because when you're creating like some kind of car part or machine part, it had to be very precise. Now, Illustrator, on the other hand, kind of gave technical drawing for artists. It's kind of like the first AutoCAD for artists. So just like how we are architects and we use AutoCAD, for the art world, Illustrator is that AutoCAD. So you'll find that a lot of the tools are similar. Things like trim, offset, hatch, fill. These are all things that you do with AutoCAD. But Illustrator is not, and I repeat, not, it is not a technical drawing program. It is very much an program for an artist, one who creates illustrations from vectors, not pixels.
I'm John Warnock, President of Adobe Systems, and I'd like to welcome you today to view a tape that we've prepared about Adobe Illustrator. It addresses the professional illustration market, and it has a lot of capabilities that you won't find in other programs.
So, for example, if you needed to draw right now, some of us probably are doing a presentation and maybe we download a floor plan or something, a tree. So for example, let's go to Google and let's say you need I don't know, a silhouette of a tree. And let's say you grab that from Google here. Let's use this one. Let's use this one. Now, if you put that in Photoshop, here we go. Of course, it's made up of pixels, as you can see. Now, this is something that's organic. So you can imagine if you took something like a plan. So for example, let's say like a floor plan. And let's use like any typical floor plan. So when you put a floor plan in Photoshop, oops, I didn't copy it, right? My bad. This is what you end up with. Now, the thing is, because you're dealing with pixels, whenever you have to do line work, this is the kryptonite for bitmap, for pixels. Because look at how pixels have to do a curve. Right? It has to do that curve from using boxes. On the other hand, Illustrator, the way that it deals with curves is using what's called Bezier curves. So, for example, that is how it deals with curves. So there are no pixels there, which means that if this floor plan was done in Illustrator, then we would not have to worry about these jaggies or these stair stepping, right? And this is why we use Illustrator for logos, right? Because once things are made up of pixels, they're finite, meaning that, remember, we started to look at the formula of how pixels work. When something is this far, that's fine. It's quote unquote sharp. But when something is closer to you, then this is definitely blurry. So vectors are not blurry. They cannot be blurry, and you have to try hard to let them be blurry. So if sharpness is what you want, especially for things like illustration and floor plans, then the vector is the place to go.
I'd only been at Adobe for a few months, and Russell said, "Here, design the packaging for Illustrator." So I started thinking about classical art and the Renaissance, and I saw the painting of Botticelli's Venus, and I thought, that's the one.
I was sold. I was sold the minute I saw it. It was that ability to manipulate curves that really got me, because curves are very important, especially if you're designing type. Traditionally, I wanted that curve and I wanted to give it a little more curve. If it wasn't right, I had to white it out and start again. Whereas in Illustrator, I could just grab it and move it.
All right, so let's talk about some of the uses of Illustrator.
I think I was meant for digital because it's just the tool that I want to deal with and not the maintenance. As you think it, you can create it.
The idea that you can sit in front of this box and craft extraordinary things that can be repurposed and published anywhere is phenomenal.
My Zen time is when I am just pointing and clicking away and endlessly manipulating Bezier curves. My chosen medium is Adobe Illustrator. It's the thing I feel most comfortable in, and I think I probably wouldn't be doing what I do if I didn't have that as a tool. If you see me hold a pencil, I hold it like a 5-year-old holds a crayon. It's really ridiculous. There's very different ways to work digitally. You can work digitally and still work in a very hand-hewn, handmade human way. Most of the work that I do by hand with lettering is really just part of my process of creating on the computer. My sketches are really just notes, so they don't have to be beautiful. I'll just take an iPhone photo of the sketch, and then I usually just drop that into an artboard in Illustrator to actually get the vector work in there. Daily Dropcap was my first major project that I did that was sort of me putting myself out there and creating something online. I would draw a letter every single day and work my way through the alphabet 12 different times. Dropcaps sort of came from this tradition of illuminated manuscripts. I really thought about all of these letters as being these like illustrative initial caps that you could put into your blog.
Pretty cool,
it got
right, guys?
traction almost immediately, and so much came from it. Most recently, this Penguin Dropcaps project, in which I'm doing 26 classic books. They created a dream project for me at Penguin, which is pretty amazing.
I consider Illustrator my pencil on the canvas. It's how I plan my paintings. I create the basic elements in Illustrator, and then Photoshop becomes the paint on top of those vectors. I tried many different angles and I could just never capture Times Square. And then when these giant printers came out, I realized that was the way to show Times Square. It has to be big like the place itself. The actual perspective was created in Illustrator because of the sheer size of it. It actually measures 5 feet on the height and 25 feet on the width. The beauty of Illustrator is that since it's resolution independent, I can work very small and enlarge it without losing any detail. A lot of my scenes are neons and lights, so to have them actually backlit, it really brings out the brilliance of the image. So that's a whole new way of doing things, is light boxes.
So that person uses Illustrator, the line work in Illustrator, to create a framework for perspective. So when you guys did perspective in first year, do you remember when you or did you have to? Where you had to create the cage for the perspective? Did you do that?
Yes, sir.
Right. So Illustrator can also do that because it's great with line work. And how that person use it is they go in Illustrator to cage it out. Then they color on top of it with a digital pen in Photoshop.
Illustrator integrates into all of my projects at some point in the pipeline, guaranteed. It is resolution independent. It doesn't matter what size you're working on. You can design for a billboard. You can design for your smartphone. A calligram is an illustration that is made out of type. It's like a mosaic made of words. You're taking the type on a path tool tens of thousands of times per illustration, and everything's vector. The entire illustration, you can zoom in infinitely and you will get down to the smallest piece of type. The Steve Jobs piece is made of the ad that Apple ran in the late 90s. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers. And so I took that copy and the most iconic Steve Jobs look and illustrated him. When I posted this
Isn't that pretty cool?
to DeviantArt, I thought, I just want to share this with people. In a few days' time, it explodes. Pretty soon the counter's up to like over 100,000 views. The design director of Time magazine sees my illustration of Steve Jobs, and he loves it.
Right. So a lot of these are just ways in which we can use Illustrator. And that is one of the main difference between the two, right? The fact that one program uses pixels and the other uses vectors. So this is why Illustrator is used to do artwork, logos, because it doesn't matter how big or how small you do the logo. Once you do a logo in a pixel-based program like Photoshop, there is a limit to how big or how small you can make it. Because remember that pixels are finite. They have to exist in a number. It has to be, the picture has to be 1,000 pixels wide or 10,000 pixels wide. Even if it's 2 million pixels wide, the fact is that there is still a finite amount of pixels. But with vectors, there are no pixels. So there's technically no limit to how sharp you can make an image. All right? And vectors are used, especially in architecture, to do presentation floor plans. And a lot of people don't know this. Some people still use Photoshop for presentation floor plans. But floor plans have a lot of line work, and hence Illustrator is usually pretty more efficient, more robust at creating floor plans. We use it for logos, we use it for artwork, And some people even use it to paint. So for example, I'm going to show you this picture here. Okay. So here we have a photograph of a car. Right. So here we have a photograph of a car. And actually, we're going to open this in Photoshop. If we can find Photoshop. Ah, here we go. Yes. All right. So here goes that picture in Photoshop. Then we're going to open this other picture in Illustrator. There we go. Now, not many people. I have some easy targets today. Not much people to call on. So, Webley, are you here? Are you here, Webley?
Me, sir?
No, not Evelyn. Um, Daniela or Danila? Are you here? No. Okay. Shay or Shy?
Yes, sir.
What do you notice with the difference with these pictures?
So I would say the quality of both.
Say again? How would you describe the difference in them? See if I can zoom in a little more. How would you describe, like, if you saw these two pictures,
Quality, sir.
or the quality? So in terms of what? Give me it in a description. What are some differences between them? Whether good or bad?
Sir, the one on the left. The picture on the left with the car with the shining, you have a little bit more this like they toned it down a little bit more to capture the car essence of its color, and then they toned the background of it to also enhance the image of the car. While the one on the right, it's flat.
Okay, cool. Excellent observation. Now, the reason it's flat, like, ever thought to yourself, okay, I showed you some examples, with curves and things like that. Can anybody, I'm throwing this one out, why would everything not just be vector? I mean, if you have to depend on pixels, so hence there's a limit to how big you can make something, then why not just make everything out of vector? Any ideas?
Sir, because I think vector is more complicated and it's more mathematics than artistic.
Not really, because technically you don't have to interface with those mathematics any at all. All you're doing is adjusting your curve. You know business what algorithms are running in the background. So I wouldn't say that would be an answer. So try again. Like, why can't everything just be vector? Like, because then you wouldn't have to worry about resolution. If you're looking for a phone to take a high resolution picture, you wouldn't be looking for megapixels. By the way, whenever you see megapixels on a phone, does anybody know what that means? Anybody?
Better resolution, sir?
It has something to do with it. For example, this image here that we've been looking at for the last couple classes, the amount of megapixels in this image is 3000 multiply by 1686. What's the answer to this? Who can give me first? Bring up a calculator. Anybody?
1 second, sir.
5,058,000.
All right. So let's just call it 5 megapixels. All right. Jadmar, the phone that you have now, how much megapixels is it?
I'm not sure, sir.
Well, you don't remember what was written on the box?
No.
Who knows what megapixel phone they have? Anybody? Anybody? Nobody bought a phone recently, so they had to look and see how much megapixels the phone have to determine if it was good enough. Nobody? Okay. So for example, if I go to,
Sir,
yeah?
mine has 12 megapixel.
Yours has 12 megapixels. So right away, your phone can take a better picture than this image that I have here. Because this picture is 5 megapixels. And how do I know? I multiply the length by the width and I get 5 million pixels. So if a phone is 10 megapixels, then it has 10 million pixels. So let's go back to the mission at hand. When we're dealing with vector, we don't have to deal with the limits of megapixels because that would mean that when you use your phone, it cannot capture more than 10 million pixels. Granted, 10 million pixels is a lot, but it still has an end. You get what I'm saying? It is not infinite. It is 10 million. But with vector, there is no limit. It is infinite. So when I ask the question, what looks different about these two pictures? And who was it again? Was it Jade? No, it was Shay. It was Shay, right? Saying that the one on the left looks more, the one on the right looks flat. Now the reason it looks flat is because it doesn't have realistic shades and shadows. And this is what vector, I'm going to say, cannot do. It can get pretty close, but it cannot do. The one thing that pixels have over vector is that pixels can display photorealistic images, meaning when you take a picture of something with your phone, it is displayed in pixels. It's not displayed in vector. Right? When you render something with a 3D program, it is rendered as pixels, not as vector. Right? So that is an advantage of pixels. Now, on the vector side, if I zoom in enough, can you guys see the squares in this image here?
Yes, sir.
Right. But if I zoom into the vector, actually, this is not the vector. Oops. This is the vector. Right. So if I zoom into the vector, what do you notice? There is not one square. And even if I try to zoom in more, like it's impossible. Like there's no squares whatsoever. It is 100% sharp. So for example, this image on the left could not be printed this close, meaning you could not use this image and blow it up big like this and print it, because then it would look horrible. But if it's far away, it will look pretty decent. Whereas the vector will look the same no matter if it's near or far. But the vector cannot display photorealism. So as long as you're doing a cartoon or something that is flat, like a floor plan, a drawing, a illustration, then vector is your guide. But once you're doing something that has to do with photorealism, like you're taking a picture of something or you're rendering something that has to be photorealistic, then pixels is still the king. Does everybody understand that example?
Yes.
All right. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to go into a little bit of a user interface for Illustrator. And then that will lead us into the class exercise. Now, this is the first time that some of us is using Illustrator. So we will do this in the afternoon session. So you can tell your classmates that, hey, we're doing Illustrator. And it's not going to be long. It's going to be short. So that we can try and do that, because I'm trying to deal with a lot of stuff that we would have dealt with in the working session, so that it can be pretty short. Because I don't want you guys to miss out on learning Illustrator. It's going to be a big part of the rest of the module. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the interface of Illustrator. Okay, guys, welcome to another exercise. So this is exercise 3, right? And in exercise 3, we're gonna look at doing vector editing using Illustrator. Now, if you head on over to the website and you select exercise 3, there we go. You will see what we have on the plate for today. So we're going to learn how to convert a sketch using Illustrator. And you know, Illustrator is an awesome tool for doing diagrams and creating vector content which can further be edited or manipulated, right? Of course, vector content is resolution independent, which is one of its major features. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a sketch and we're going to convert that to vector using lines, symbols, arrows, and investigate some of the uses of Illustrator. So with that said, let's fire up Illustrator. Now, just like the other, just like Photoshop, Illustrator will also give you a landing screen, and we're going to choose create new. Now, for this particular exercise, we are going to use a letter size document. So we're going to choose letter size, and we're going to be portrait, and everything else we will leave as default and choose create. Now, when you pull up Illustrator, you're going to notice some similarities with Photoshop. Now, we have already experimented with manipulating the user interface with Photoshop. Hence, we can apply some of the lessons learned to using Illustrator. So the first thing to notice is that things are pretty much the same. We do have our panels, or which is our detail tools located over here. We do have our tools, our general tools located over here, and we still have a control bar at the top, right, along with our menus. And we are also showing statistics at the bottom of the page. So far most of these features seems to be aligned with what we notice in Photoshop. Now there are a few differences, and we're gonna explore that as we go along. Now the first thing to realize is our details area, which houses our panels. These are our specific tools. There are a couple options. Now we already know that we can see what panels to enable by using our window menu, and as you can see here, it would almost seem like Illustrator has just about the same amount of panels as Photoshop. Now just like before, what we're going to do is we're going to pull out most of these panels, so we're going to pull them out, right? And these are panels that are minimized to icons. So remember, you are able to maximize your panel by clicking the maximize button, and then that's what you would get. But let's not worry about that now. Let us just pull out all of these panels. Now currently this is the default setup for Illustrator, which is called Essentials, right? And when you open Illustrator for the first time, a fresh installation of Illustrator, this is what you will see. And you can see these are the panels that they pretty much start you off with. Now if you're using the newer version of Illustrator, there is a new panel that you will notice here called Properties, and another one called Libraries. Now these are just regular panels just like these other ones, so we're going to also pull them out, and we're going to pull out Libraries here. All right, now these are the same panels as you see here, they're just maximized. So if we minimize them, they turn into an icon. Now right now we have basically dragged out all of the panels that you see here, and we're gonna actually close these out. And we're simply just repeating what we had done with Photoshop. We're going to create our own set of panels and tools that we're going to use for this exercise. Most of the times, most of the panels that you start off with might not be the ones you would want to use. And depending on the tasks that you want to accomplish in Illustrator, you would use the panels that would be necessary for that task. Let's also pull out our tools menu as well, and we'll take a look at this tools menu in detail a bit more. Okay, so we're going to go to window, and we're going to use our color panel, so we're going to open that up. We are also going to use our layers panel. We are going to use our stroke panel. We're also going to use our type. And when you go to type, we're going to enable character, And notice how when you open character, you actually get these three panels together. So this is actually character and paragraph and open type. We're going to leave open type for now. So we're going to use the character and paragraph panels. Okay, so these are the panels we're going to use. So what we're going to do now is we are going to expand these panels. So we're going to click on that's the expand button there, and that will expand out the panels. So we're going to expand out all of these other panels here. Okay, good. All right. There we go. And let us now dock them together. So we're going to dock paragraph and character. We're going to dock strokes and color. And we're going to dock the layers. Let us dock that below. Now notice when I move the layers panel below, it highlights there. So it actually attaches below stroke. And we're gonna carry character and paragraph together. So this is our own little custom panel setup here. And what we're gonna do is save this layout. So we're gonna go to Window. Then we're going to go to Workspace and then New Workspace. And we're going to call this layout DDM. Great. So now we have our workspace set up with the panels that we will use. Now, before we get going with our exercise, I want us to get familiar with how Illustrator functions, because there are some differences compared to that of Photoshop. Now, Illustrator also has a section for dealing with layers, right? As you can remember, with Photoshop, layers is what we use to control the different elements on our artboard. Now, let us, for example, use a tool that we also use in Photoshop. So I am going to use the rectangle tool here. Now, how this works is I click the tool once, and then I'm able to draw that tool, that shape on the artboard. Now, in Illustrator, this is called your artboard. In Photoshop, it's called, forgive me, in Illustrator, it's called your artboard, and in Photoshop, it's called your canvas. So that is just the terminology that Illustrator uses. Now, what you've seen here is that I have placed an object, a rectangle, on my artboard. Now, unlike Photoshop, Illustrator allows multiple objects to exist on individual layers. So let's do another example here. So if you remember how this works, so these indicators that you see here means that there are sub-tools located within the same region of this tool, just like with Photoshop. So what we're going to actually do is we are going to change this tool to the ellipse tool, and hence if we draw that shape now, we will get a circle. Now, an interesting note here is that both of these objects that we have drawn are on layer 1. In Photoshop, each of these would end up being on individual layers. However, in Illustrator, we can have multiple objects, as you can see here, on a single layer. So the rectangle is here and the ellipse is here, and we're able to actually manipulate them by selecting the ellipse here. And when you select the ellipse, notice that there is a little blue highlight that tells you that, hey, this is the element that's located on this layer that is highlighted. The same thing if I highlight the circle here, then notice that the blue highlight changes here to now say that I have the ellipse selected. Now both of these are located on layer 1, as you can see here. So anytime one of these are selected, layer 1 itself will also get a little highlight here to say that an object within layer 1 is selected. So already we see some of the differences with how layers operate in Illustrator. Now the thing is, sorry, for those of you using Illustrator for the first time, we're going to take a little while to get used to this. And this is why I kind of want to introduce the interface from now. Now, when we come back for the afternoon session, we're just going to kind of dive into the rest of Illustrator. But for now, we're going to just look on the user interface. Does anybody here have Illustrator currently open? Go by the raising or thumbs up of your hand. Nobody?
No, sir, I don't get it.
Okay. So we're going to need Illustrator for later, right?
Yes, sir, no problem.
Now, this might be a little tricky. So what I'm going to do is I am going to say, let's see. I am going to say that we will tackle the other half of this exercise in the working session, because it's only going to get a little bit more complicated, and if we don't have Illustrator, it's just going to pass straight through our brains. So I'm hoping that from what you already get you kind of have an idea of how at least shapes are drawn and how you do fill and stroke and those things. But I'm going to leave some of this for the afternoon session. And if I see anybody in the afternoon session, then we will proceed. All right, guys?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I'm going to kind of end this session a little earlier so I can let you guys go, and then I will see you later in the afternoon session. All right? Okay. So, good luck with the studio work that you are sorting out. I hope you get through it, and I hope that I am able to see you guys later. Take care, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Take care, sir.
No problem.